So, if you're an older gamer like myself, this code right here will look very familiar to you. This is the famous Konami code. Most of you could probably recite this just by memory. So, recently, I was perusing the internet, as I do often, and I came across a clip of someone complaining about how they could recite this code by heart. They casted it as sort of like a negative, like, why do I know this and I don't know math or history? I could have been learning something much more interesting or much more useful than this Konami code that I wasted my time learning. And this, of course, got me thinking. I myself can recite a code that I used fairly often. It was the code for the Super Star Wars series. If you held down the left and right buttons on player number 2, which I did with my feet, and then hit AABBXXYY, ABXY, ABXY, start select at the same time, then you got debug mode. And it pretty much gave you invincibility. You could alter the colors. You could do all sorts of things. You could infinite thermal detonators. So if you just kept hitting the X button, it would just blow everything up all the time. It was great. So the question is, why do we remember stuff like that? And is it fair to say that, if I had only been studying calculus during this time, this was a complete waste of time? Well, I don't think that framing is quite correct. If you were forced to study calculus over playing video games, it would take much more effort to learn calculus than it did to memorize the Konami code. So the reason for that is because you're having fun. So I was a teacher for 11 years, and when I studied educational practices, one of the main things I learned was that you need to teach students in an engaging way that lets them have fun. You need to teach them without them realizing they're being taught. If you can get a student to have fun, then they will learn whatever the content is. Now, when we think of people sitting and playing video games, the stereotypical image that everyone hates, every mom hates, every parent seems to hate, is the kid sitting there with his eyes glued to the TV and has this dead look on his face, and it almost the critique is that he's brain dead or he's a couch potato. The fact is that state actually has a name. It's called the flow state. And it's actually something that teachers should try to encourage in their students. And game designers, it is the state you want to aim for when you're designing your game. What's happening is you basically lose track of time. And while it looks like not much is going on the outside, an incredible amount of brain activity is going on the inside. You're having fun, and you will recall all the information that you need to because you're in the state. Your brain is memorizing things in this state much more effectively than if you're just trying to study the Konami code or study calculus or studying history. Achieving the flow state is difficult. It lies between challenge and skill and stress and relaxation. You want to stress out the player enough so that they're fully engaged, but you don't want to stress them out too much so that they lose interest in the game. On the flip side, the game has to be easy enough so the player can progress, but not too easy so that they get bored. You got to find that middle ground. And this is something I'm going to bring up a chart and do another video on this, I think, because it really is a fascinating aspect of game design and education, if that's your thing. Another example I use is that I used to be a big fan of the Star Wars customizable card game made by Decipher in the 90s and the early 2000s. Great game. There's never been anything like it since. Most games, card games these days, are derivative of Magic the Gathering, which isn't a bad thing, but this game was really unique. Go look it up. You can still play it online. There's a player committee that still makes cards, but anyway, that's besides the point. On each card, there was a little lore box, which sometimes had keywords that affected gameplay, but most of it was just stuff about the story. So if you had a Luke Skywalker card, there was a lore box that told a little bit about Luke Skywalker. If you had an interrupt card or a weapon card, there were lore boxes that gave you so much information. And I loved Star Wars. I played this game and I read those cards, and I learned a ton of Star Wars lore just by playing the game. And I often wonder if they had made a game that was the exact same game, but instead of Star Wars, it was like United States history or World War history or something like that within the lore box had historical facts, that would be great. If I ever get back into teaching, maybe I'll do something like that. I'll make a game like that that's actually interesting and fun to get my students to learn in a way that's fun and engaging. See, that would be a better comparison than the, oh, if I'd only been taught calculus instead of wasting my time playing video games. If you're taught calculus in the right way, it's a fair comparison. But if you're just saying, I should spend my time doing something different, then it's not really a fair comparison. You have to understand that we learn best when we have fun, which is why it's important that the games we play are actual quality games. There is some merit to playing a game that's really, really well done in gameplay, music, visuals, and story. There's merit to watching a movie that's really well done. There's merit to reading a book that's really well done. It teaches us things. And when we get engaged, when we get into that flow state, we recall things that we normally wouldn't be able to recall, like if we're just reading a calculus textbook or a history textbook. Okay, there's a reason why we remember stories far better than we do just straight facts in general. Okay? I recognize that as a teacher and as someone who's a game critic, aspiring game critic, that what is challenging for one person or interesting for one person is not always interesting for another person. But there are generalities that do work. These are often called best practices. Teacher best practices and game design best practices are meant to engage the most players in the right way. Are there outliers? Yes. But that doesn't mean you won't have effective results if you apply these best practices. Anyway, what are some codes that you remember that you can recite off the top of your head? What are some interesting game facts that you can recall off the top of your head, or movie lines that really stuck out to you because you were so engaged? All of this has to do with do you think that you can be engaged in a game in a right way or a wrong way? Do you think I'm wrong about this vegetative state that people experience when they play video games? What do you think is going on in people's heads? Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Let me know your thoughts. I'd love to continue this conversation, and I'll talk to you again soon. Let me know your thoughts, and thank you for listening.